Great. Thank you and welcome everyone. Welcome to webinar on ISO 59010. Really great to have you here. People have shown great interest. That is really good. Today, me and Amir, we will walk you through this standard. We will provide an quick overview. Then we will discuss some of the issues and challenges that we think should be addressed during the revision of this standard. And then we would like to hear some feedback from you. How do you experience with this document? Was it helpful? Or if you have any feedback. And this is really important because ISO is also conducting a global survey where they are asking for input from industry, especially who are using this document to get support in their circular economy implementation. So before going to the standard and the presentation, a brief about us, the speakers. My name is Shoaib-ul-Hasan. I am member of the Swedish Technical Committee on Circular Economy, SIS TK 616. I've been involved there for more than 3 years now. I'm also involved at the European level for standardization on circular economy, working in Working Group 2, which is focusing on information sharing for circular economy. And I was part of the Working Group 2 at ISO, tasked with developing this standard 59010 as part of the Technical Committee 323. I'm working as a researcher here at KTH, working in the Circular Manufacturing Systems Research Group together with Amir. And we mostly work with manufacturing companies, helping them implement circular manufacturing systems. Amir, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Shoaib. And hi, everybody. Amir Rashid. I'm professor here at the Department of Production Engineering at KTH. And with reference to today's webinar being on this particular standard, so I have been part of the standardization activities since 2019, when this whole thing was started from the SIS and ISO side, and have been expert member for several different, let's say, groups, primarily contributing in WG2, which was responsible for this particular standard that we were discussing today. But then moving forward, I'm also part of the SEN group 1 and 4, and also expert member at the SIS TK 616 Circular Economy group here.
Thank you, Amir. So yes, it's been great working on the development of these standards. And today, we would like to share what we learned and how the process was and what we developed actually. And you will see that we are asking for a lot of, giving a lot of suggestions and proposals. And this is because of the internal critique on these standards, because they are published last year, but we feel that there is room for improvement. And then we will make some suggestions and we will ask feedback from you as well. So moving forward, as most of you know, this circular economy TC323 has published total 5 documents for our standards. One is technical report. We will focus more on 3 standards where the ISO is asking for feedback. First standard is ISO 59004, which basically focuses on defining what circular economy is, the different principles of the circular economy, and it also provides a general guidance for circular economy implementation. Then second standard we have is ISO 59010, which is the focus of the webinar today. This focuses on basically on the business model and how organization can transition their business model and value networks towards circularity. Then we have another important standard, ISO 59020, which focuses on assessing and measuring circularity and circularity performance. All these standards are highly interdependent on each other. In particular, the standard ISO 59010, it depends a lot on both ISO 59004 and ISO 59020. And you will see that interconnectedness when we proceed through the webinar today. So before going to 59010, this is a framework picture taken from 59004, the first standard, which provides definitions and a general guidance for implementation. And the general guidance is provided in clause 7, and which is about circular economy implementation. And in that general guidance, the standard says that you should start with incorporating circular economy principles. So circular economy principles, as you can see in the center here, they are the starting point. Once you have understood the circular economy principles, then second thing you should do is to understand the context in which you operate. It could be your legal context, it should be operational context, where you are located, what kind of resources you are using, and your current situation, assessment of your current situation. And once you have done that, then you should define your purpose, mission, vision, and goals. And based on these purpose, mission, vision, and goal, you should prioritize the strategic areas for circular economy and develop the action plan. And after you have developed the action plan, then you should implement that plan, implement the circular economy, and then you monitor, review, and report after you have implemented it. As you can see, there is a question here. This is a question that we will not address in the webinar today. This is a question which ISO is asking as part of the survey. The survey link is provided below. This is for you just to read and maybe reflect a bit on it, that what we are discussing here, how it relates to this question and whether this question answers our, for example, webinar helps you answer this question or not. So there will be a lot of questions in the upcoming slides you will see. We will not go through those questions. Those are only for you to read and reflect a bit. So as you can see, this is the general framework, which is really good. The text provided along with this general framework for circular economy implementation is very good. We have gone through the text, but we feel that there is a little bit of misalignment between the text and the picture itself. So we are proposing, we will be proposing in our feedback, a slightly modified picture, as you can see here, where the starting point, as you can see here, is the circular economy principles. And once you have incorporated, understood the circular economy principles, then you move to the context and reference situation assessment. Then you define the goals. Then you go to the strategic priorities and action plan development. Then you go to the circular economy implementation, and then review and reporting. This is really nothing new. It's the same picture as you can see here, but slightly different restructure to make it more clear and easy to read. Because you can see here, we have here double arrows. Double arrows means there is a feedback loop. And these feedback loops are basically the operational iterations. So when you have developed an action plan, then you implement it, you get feedback, you change a plan a little bit, and then you implement. The same as the feedback loop here. And if you go here, the big cycle, this is a strategic iteration. So it's the same picture, but slightly more clear, easy to read. And we will be proposing this for the review. Moving forward, when you start implementing circular economy and when you are deciding the strategic priorities, and if your focus is on the entire business model that you want to transition the entire business model towards circular economy, then you should get guidance from the ISO 59010, which we will walk you through today. So basically, this standard ISO 59010 provides guidance for organizations to transition their business model and value networks towards circularity. Here you can see the standard uses the term value creation models, which is basically synonym for business model. So whenever you read somewhere value creation model, you can read business model as well. They're the same. And this document is applicable to any organization, regardless of the size, sector, or region. And as I already said, that this document makes references to ISO 59004 and ISO 59020. And there are terms and definition is this standard as well, but they're mostly reproduced from ISO 59004, which was basically on the definitions, principles. And then the readers can also get help from other sources, for example, ISO and IEC Electropedia, to understand the definitions. We will not go in detail of the definitions, but this is really important because it's about circular economy. So we thought it's good that we share the definition with you, the definition of circular economy. So the standard defines circular economy as an economic system that uses a systemic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by recovering, retaining, or enhancing their value, while contributing to sustainable development. And resources can be considered concerning both stocks and flows, And the purpose here is that the inflow of virgin resources is kept as low as possible, and the circular flow of resources is kept as closed as possible to minimize waste, losses, releases from the economic system. And maybe, Amir, you can explain a bit about the stocks and flows for people to understand.
Yeah, actually, just to maybe point out that when we are talking about stocks in this particular context, so then we are talking about the stocks in the economy. The stocks that are not really a part of the economy, they are not the concern here. And there is another thing that I would like to add, Shoaib, that this is the latest definition of circular economy that's basically done under the work that has been part of this 590 series. But I should highlight that there are at least two more definitions under the, let's say, different standards of the ISO. One that was adapted directly from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation definition, and that is part of the sustainable procurement standard. And then there was another definition also done in 2022. So the first one was adapted in 2017. The second was done 2022. That was in the waste management context, and this is the latest one that we actually refer to in this 590 series.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. And something important to highlight here is that the standard makes reference to a lot of other definitions. For example, there is a separate definition for circular flow of resources. There is a separate definition for recovering value, retaining value, and enhancing value. So we will not go through all of the definitions, but I picked some of the definitions here for you to read. For example, the recover value, the standard provides the definition process to recuperate the value of the object of consideration. The object of consideration here could be a product or the solution that organization is providing. Retain value, process to maintain the value of the object of consideration. Add value, process to increase the value of the object of consideration. After reading these definitions, we feel that, and we ask the question, are they really helpful? Although they are very simple, they are very straightforward, but are they really helping the reader understand these concepts? But then we identified that there is a little bit of concern, as you can see, that these definitions are basically circular definitions. So a circular definition is when a word or concept is defined using the same word or a closely related form of itself, making the definition unhelpful or redundant. As you can see here, recover, we are using the synonym recuperate. Retain, we are using the synonym maintain. Add, we are using the synonym increase, and value is also used. So either these definition can be improved without using the term synonyms and the term itself in the definition, so the reader gets much more help and better understanding. And these definitions are important to understand because you will see that when we are categorizing the actions for that contribute to circular economy, we are categorizing them under actions that recover value, actions that help to retain value, actions that help to add value. So if you now go back to the definition of circular economy again, and you will see that there is a little bit of circularity here as well. As you can see, for example, economy, we are using the similar related word, circular economic system. Circular, we are using the term circular. Not to judge this definition, but we leave it to you if it really helps you or if it can be improved further. So the reader gets better understanding of what circular economy is. But this is a basic rule that a circular economy shouldn't be circular. So not everything circular is good. At least a circular definition is not a good definition. It doesn't help the reader understand the concept better. Moving forward, ISO 59010 has total 8 clauses. 3 clauses we have already gone through: the scope, the normative reference, and the definitions. But these are this is the core of the standard. And today we will focus a lot on clause 4, clause 5, and clause 6, because we see there is a lot of opportunity for improvement. There are a lot of issues there that we will try to highlight and get your feedback on those issues. But we will walk you through these clauses one by one. So clause 4 basically is about setting the goals and the boundary. And this clause has 6 subclauses. Subclause 1 is goal definition. This is where you need to decide what the organization seeks to achieve. What is the main motivation? What is the main driver? What is it that the organization wants to achieve? Second subclause is understanding the current value creation model and value network. And here the standard refers to the business model elements that you need to go through your business model elements and try to review them. Clause 3 states to map the value chain and value networks. So here the purpose is that first of all, you need to understand how your value chain is structured, how your value network is structured, who are the supplier, who are the customers, who is connected with whom. And then once you have mapped them, then you need to decide how you want to focus. So for example, you want to focus at the organization level in this 4.4, or you want to focus at the first year suppliers, maybe at the value chain level, or maybe the whole value network. So you need to decide the scope and the boundary for circular economy. And then in the same clause, the standard refers to that you need to assess your circularity performance, and then you need to consider the actions that contribute to circular economy. And it provides a very long list of actions, which is really good. It's the core content of this standard, that we have a list of actions categorized under, for example, I'm not sure if it is readable, but actions that create added value, actions that contribute to value retention, actions that contribute to value recovery. So we have categorized different actions under different categories, and companies can choose which action to consider. What we see problem with this clause here is that if you look at the title of the clause, the title says setting the goals and the boundary. And that should have ended already here. Once we have set the boundary, we should have moved to the next clause. And these, you will see that they are being repeated again in clause 5, this subclause 4.5 and 4.6. They are in clause 4 as well as, and they are being repeated again in clause 5 as well. So we suggest to move these clauses to clause 5. And not only this, if you go back and if you remember the general framework of circular economy implementation, the framework always starts with the circular economy principles. So the first thing organization should do is try to understand the circular economy principles and try to incorporate those principles. And based on them, then you assess your current situation, and then you move to the goal definition. You don't move directly to the goal definition. So we will suggest here, for example, 4.1, incorporate circular economy principles, and 59004 provides 6 principles of circular economy. Then second subclause, reference situation assessment and goal definition, which is basically, it was only goal definition. We are adding to this the reference situation assessment as well. And then the next clauses are the same. For example, understanding the current value creation model and value network. Companies can use business model canvas, mapping the value chain and value network flows, and setting the boundary and addressing the circularity. So this is what we think should be the structure of clause 4. And it should end once we have decided the boundary for circular economy implementation. And then moving to next clause 5, which is in its current form is really problematic, at least in our opinion. Why it is problematic? Because the heading of this clause is determining a circular economy strategy. And if you see, it has 3 subclauses. Subclause 1 is identify gaps and opportunities. Then subclause 2 is again determining a circular economy strategy based on circular economy principles. This is basically the same as the main clause. So there is no much difference in the main clause and the subclause. And then third subclause is addressing economic rationalization. But here the most important clause is 5.2, which provides a framework for developing circular economy strategy. And if you can see here, again, subclause 1 is being repeated here. Identify gaps and opportunities, and also circularity performance, which was previously part of clause 4. So we are again asking people to do circularity performance assessment here in subclause 5.2. So to make it easy to read for the readers and to make it more clear, we have some proposals that we will share with you today. For example, this is a little bit of restructuring. We are not changing much. As you can see here, arrows are also really not clear how to read them. So we are suggesting a slightly restructured picture here. For example, on the top, we have determine a circular economy strategy, which is the aim of the clause 5. And it should start with the circular economy principles. And based on the circular economy principles, companies should evaluate their business model elements and to see which elements are lacking the integration of circular economy principle, where they should act, for example. So you assess your current your business model elements in light of the circular economy principles. And then in step 2, you assess the circular economy performance to identify gaps and opportunities. In step 3, based on the identified gaps and opportunities, you select actions and enablers that should be implemented and that can contribute to circular economy and that can address those gaps and opportunity. And in the final stage 4, you map those actions and enablers to the business model elements. And you will see this picture being repeated again because I will go zoom in a little bit into each step. So 5.1 clause that we are suggesting now, so subclause 5.1, this should be incorporate circular economy principles to evaluate and select business model elements for transition. So companies should, so you have the principles, you look at your business model elements, and then you see which elements we can work with, which elements should be transitioned towards circular economy. And after you have done this analysis, then you go to the step 2 here, where you have already selected some business model elements, and you assess the circularity performance for those business model elements. And you see what are the gaps and opportunities, what is the current status, and how we can make it better. And there, the reference is to ISO 59020, which is standard to assess circularity performance. It provides a list of indicators, for example, that can be used to assess the performance. This is a really good standard. The only issue we see at this point, we will not go in detail, but the only issue we see is that this standard is silent about the value. It focuses a lot on the resources and the material inflows, outflows, energy, water, but it's a bit silent about the value, which is the core concept in circular economy. Because, for example, when a raw material enters a company, it has a different value, and when finished product leaves the organization, it has a different value. There's a value transformation happening. And that's a core concept. And I think the standard should address how we can measure the value as well over the time. Then moving from this, once you have identified gaps and opportunities, we move to step 3, which is here. Where, for example, based on the gaps and opportunities and the circular economy assessments, you choose from a list of actions that the standard provides. And we think that these actions and enablers should be part of the clause 5.3, where we suggest the reader, okay, here's the list of actions based on your identified gaps and opportunities. Choose whichever is relevant for you. Choose whichever actions and enablers you think can help you address the gaps and exploit the opportunities that you have identified in the previous step. After step 3, then we move to the step 4. So once you have identified the actions and enablers, then you go back to your business model concept. You see, okay, now we have identified actions and enablers, and you try to map those actions and enablers to different business model elements. For example, do you want to change the value proposition? Can you take some action from here? For example, remanufacturing. Or maybe a sharing to intensify use. Can we change the value proposition? Can we change the key activities? So you map all those actions to different business model elements. And this mapping is basically your transition strategy. So we define transition strategy as mapping of actions and enablers, CE-focused actions and enablers to different business model elements to transition towards circular economy. Once you have this initial strategy, last subclause here that we are suggesting is to address the economic and environmental rationalization. Previously, the standard refers only to economic rationalization, but based on our experience working with a lot of manufacturing companies, we've been working with companies for more than 12 years now, implementing circular economy. And we believe that both of these, economic and environmental rationalization, is really important before you go to actual implementation. There are many ways to assess this. For example, we use a lot of modeling and simulation where we try to have the system in a virtual world before we go for actual implementation. And it gives us some indication about economic and environmental performance, how the system will behave. And here, as you can see, these are just example arrows. For example, if you change something in the value proposition, what would be the impact on revenues? What would be the impact on, for example, CO2? If we change our channels, if we change our key activities, so how they will impact our economic and environmental performance. So this is what we suggest should be in the clause 5 of the standard. And then here we have summarized. So what we are suggesting basically is moving from this current framework to this is what we are suggesting. And this is we will hopefully publish a paper about it as well, because this is also coming a lot from the companies that we have been working with. So this suggests exactly, I mean, if you see here, the last 4 steps are the same, but we are adding 1 step more for companies, that this is the starting point as well, that you need to know which areas, what are your goals, for example, here, which is addressed in clause 4. So what is the main assumption or main driver for which you want to go towards circular economy? And then the rest of the things are same. So step 1 is understanding the circular economy concept and prioritize the assumptions and principles. Step 2 is review the prioritized elements of the business model. Step 3 is assess circularity performance to identify gaps and opportunities. Step 4 is identify and prioritize CE-focused actions and enablers. And in the last step, you develop your strategy, basically. So develop a strategy, circular transition strategy, by mapping the actions and enablers to business model elements. And so here, this is the core. Once you have, this is basically a blueprint of actions and enablers mapped to different business model elements. And this is your strategy. And once you have your strategy, then the general framework of circular economy implementation, which is proposed in 59004, it says once you have this action plan, once you have this strategy, next step is to implement circular economy. And that's where the standard suggests to go to clause 6. And I would like to invite Amir to briefly walk us through the rest of the clauses. You're muted, Amir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shoaib. I think you have done the difficult part of it, and I will just, summarize. Now we are at the point where we would like to do the transitioning part itself, so which is more about, developing the plan and then implementing it. So developing plan is not really anything that is very specific to, for example, just this circularity. I mean, it's a standard way of developing plan, and Shoaib has already explained. The important part here is this, basically the KPIs that you actually identify in your plan. And all those KPIs basically are available for, let's say, the guidance is available in 59020, which is primarily on the measurement and monitoring. What is important is basically the value creation model. That's where things will happen, right? And that's the second clause, reviewing the value creation model. And I will try to basically just explain a little bit more in the context of circularity. I think most of us are familiar with the business model canvas, but how we look at it in the context of circularity and in the context of this particular standard. So that's what, Shoaib, if you can move next. All right. So these are the 9 elements of the business model canvas, as we, most of us, I hope, are familiar with that. Value proposition, in our opinion, is the driving in the driving seat here, right? And this is something that actually drives everything. All the other 8 elements of the business model canvas are driven by value proposition. And value propositions can be actually simply, you think about whatever proposition enables you to basically have products for multiple use and multiple life cycles. Now, there can be several different forms and different ways to think about those circular propositions. We are, in this particular, let's say, we of course can find the examples of such value propositions. We already know that there are possibilities to go for example, buyback business approach or leasing approach or business, products as services. There are several different, let's say, value propositions out in the market, but this standard is not really focusing on any particular or any specific one. It is it is taking a more generic approach where the circular propositions should actually focus on the products for multiple use and multiple life cycles. And next, sure. So key activities, there can be several different activities, but here what we would like to highlight is that when you go circular, well, your products and supply chains need to be designed in a different way. And then the guiding principle again will be coming from the value proposition. That is basically having a value proposition for multiple use and multiple life cycles would actually guide the design of the products and the supply chains as well. What happens in the next is the key business resources. We all understand that if we are going to close, let's say, the loop of the products or components or even materials, we will need, let's say, enhanced infrastructure, physical infrastructure, which is capable of handling, for example, the reverse flows, right? Human capital, well, if the people are actually trained and skilled in managing the reverse flows and taking care of that part, right? Customer segment, of course, you will have to think of, customers who are open to circular value propositions. Sales model will, of course, be maybe the main, let's say, stream of revenues for the companies today. But you will have to think about future customers who are open to circular value propositions. And then customer relationships have to be more forward-looking, that now the customers, in order to close the loop of the flows, customers might be acting as suppliers in the reverse flows as well. So this will be a more loyal kind of relationship that is different from the linear flows. When it comes to channels, well, of course, channels to distribute and channels to communicate for the circular proposition and products will, of course, also be reconsidered. When it comes to the costs, so the cost structures will be definitely coming under scrutiny because of the reverse flows, because there will be now reverse flows will be having a different way of accounting and discounting the costs on your products and when the products are being brought back into the system after use. Revenue streams, today the linear business is, of course, very dominated by cost-based revenue streams, but we will, of course, be moving more towards use-based revenue streams, and they will also be strongly connected to what kind of value proposition we ultimately choose to start with. Key partners, of course, one example is that we will have to look into forward and reverse flow partners. Forward flow partners of today might not exactly be able to handle the reverse flows as well, or they might be capable of doing both. So this is something that key partners will have to be reconsidered. And of course, that will very much connect again with the value proposition that we start with. Yes, sure, next. Yeah, here, when we come to clause 7 is basically nothing more than just expanding the scope, moving beyond the boundaries of a company or a corporate within, for example, only within its own ecosystem and going beyond. Then we are talking about the same way of approaching to the value networks development for circularity. And then, of course, they follow the same route, developing, for example, objectives, strategy, and plan. In some cases, maybe a new governance structure, a new governance system, and also then leveraging on the infrastructure. Could it be that the networks can share, for example, in this case, their physical infrastructures and their digital infrastructures? And this, I think, will be very much connected to what we discussed earlier with the sort of partnerships. What kind of partnerships will develop when you are only considering your own ecosystem and if you want to go beyond and become part of larger networks? Yes,
yeah.
Sure. Next.
Just to highlight, Amir, that there is ongoing ballot at ISO, so maybe there will be a dedicated standard focusing only on the value network, transitioning of value networks towards circularity.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I think I will spend more time here because this is just the further explanation of the three headings. So they're self-explaining. Yeah, reviewing and monitoring of the continuous improvement. So here we are talking about measuring and assessing, improving the value creation model of the organization, and improving the value network. So depending on if we are working within the bounds of the organization or if we are working beyond the bound of the organization, so then it will be again depending on what is our scope, measuring and assessing. You will have to define the KPIs, and those KPIs will again be referred for their definition to the ISO 59020. So I think that was the last slide. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we have good time for a Q&A session as well, and that's important, of course. And I think that there are already some questions, but feel free to either write the question or raise your hands.
Yeah, I will maybe stop sharing the screen so we can have more engaging discussion. So please, you are more than welcome to ask question, or if you have any comment.
So Shoaib, maybe we can take the questions in the chat first.
Yes. What about the measures that aim to prevent and minimize material use to both reduce the need of virgin materials and reduce the size of the material flows? Are these not considered in this definition of circular economy? As you see in the definition, there is a circular flow of resources, and there is then there is further definition of the circular flow of resources. But I think there is a lot of emphasis on minimizing, and one of the principle is basically dedicated to this. So if you go to this one principle, like principle number 4, resource stewardship, it talks about narrowing, slowing the resource flows. So I think it is covered in the standard.
But I think one thing that we can probably consider from this question is that it may not be very explicit in the definition, but it is part of the principles for sure that it is basically the first approach should be to minimize the use of resources.
Second question is, why do you suggest, if you have any comment, first of all, Jan, if you have any comment on our comment, please feel free to talk.
I have recognized that this was lacking in the, so to speak, the outspoken definition.
Yeah.
I think it would be good if you could add it somehow and make it even more clear. I understand your point about the principle, but there's so much that you can do in this end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, we agree, and that as I said, like the definitions are under the scope of 59004, but we will definitely provide the feedback. As you have seen that we discussed some of the definitions at the start of the webinar, but we will provide feedback on those definitions. But I mean, in the circular economy definition, we are using the term circular flow of resources. And if you go to the definition of circular flow of resources, it is referring to the circular economy principles. And then if you go to the principles, one of the principles is dedicated to narrowing, slowing the resource flows, basically.
Yeah, but this what I'm raising, of course, is questioning the existing flows, not just narrowing them in a sense. Maybe what you are saying is narrowing them. Yeah. But I also would like to compliment you on the fact that you so strongly emphasize value creation. And just today, I work with Resource, as you may know, the Strategic Innovation Program. We released 4 reports with 4 case studies, and the case studies are all really about creating customer value, and then the circular strategies are supporting that or making that even more valuable. So I think anything that does not consider creating customer value and of course also value for the provider is not likely to succeed. So just a compliment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Second question is, why do you suggest removing the goals of organization? I don't think we suggest such thing. In clause 4, we are saying that before you go to goal definition, you should understand the circular economy principles, and then you should assess your current situation and define the goals. So we are not suggesting removing it, but your goals should be aligned with the circular economy principles. That's what we are saying. The starting point is understanding the circular economy concept, definitions, principles, and then you set your goals, organizational goals. Next question is, what about the social rationalization by Anis? And I'm not sure if we have Raul with us. Raul?
Yes, you do.
Yes, we have Raul with us. So I put this question to you because this comes under the assessment in 59020.
Yeah, I can say something about that because I was really participating in the 59020 development.
Yeah.
And we really decided not to repeat any other standardization like life cycle assessment. We did not repeat. We did not repeat social life cycle assessment that has been developed in parallel, but we refer to them. So we are really trying to measure the circularity of flows in the sense that you just described, Sayed, that it's not only making them circulate, but it actually within the definition and principles of circular economy. So we're really trying to quantify these, and we should always relate that to the sustainability aspects that we think are relevant for different parts of the value networks. So that is when we come into the social aspects also. So it's really stressed, and we talk about the complementary methods. So we not just methods to use if you want to, but as you see in the definition of circular economy, it should always contribute to sustainability, and then you need the other tools that are not part of our standardization work, but should be complemented with them.
Thank you, Raul.
Thank you, Raul.
Anis, do you have any follow-up comment?
I mean, yeah, I got the point, but like there might be some harms or concerns on that. Like if you are not integrally include like a social dimension of like a circular economy here, including the local consumption and the production, or like other aspects of like a regeneration, social regeneration, and it kind of gives the, I think, impression that this standard is created for monopolies or large companies. Like from my perspective, if I understand in the limited time correctly, I don't know if you have any take on that.
I think we could share a reply because I will add a little bit more on what you said. There is one additional standard we have not mentioned here, 59014, which is on secondary materials, and it includes all the secondary product handling, so to say, because we know that circular economy, whenever it actually is a circle, in the way that it goes somewhere back to start being value one more time, we have to think about social considerations, and that standard is developed very much on the basis of 26,000. So it's part of that thinking. It has been developed also together with SC5 in TC207. Sorry for giving you figures, but that means that the LCA group in environmental management standards. So we have had that thinking. But again, I will leave it back to you because it's part of what I was also reflecting over when I look at this with this standard, that you expect very powerful organizations to be able to create a value network, and how one guides that question. So in that sense, I agree with your question there. So maybe
and maybe if I can add, I think NSI, of course, with all the explanation that Raul has given in the work, the way it was actually rationalized, what we should include and what we should not, we take this critique. Actually, it's a good idea that it can be made more explicit in this standard as well. And this is a good feedback, and we will definitely take it back to the because as Shoaib highlighted that there is a survey already out, so there is a possibility that these standards will go into revision relatively soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anis. Then we have the next question from Julia. Julia, would you like to ask that question if you are still in the webinar?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I was wondering about the way so basically you propose to do this shift from defining of circular strategy to define circle transition strategy. So I wonder, how do you actually understand it? How you what does it mean for you, circular transition strategy? And what kind of the process to define it? I believe it's not that straightforward, right?
No, it's not. And then it took us a lot of effort. We have recently written a paper. I will be presenting that paper on April 10th in a conference in Washington. It is about circular transition strategy, and we have attempted to define it. So what it is, if you remember the framework, the final framework that I showed you, 5-step framework, and we are trying to define circular transition strategy based on that framework. So it is basically it's a mapping of CE focused actions and enablers to key strategic areas of the organization, aligned with the principles of circular economy and the assumptions of circular economy. So we are trying to cover from the top, the assumptions, and the second step, the principles, third step, the key strategic areas, fourth step, the assessment within the key strategic areas, and fifth step, actions and enablers. So based on these 5 steps, we are proposing a definition of circular transition strategy. It's basically what we think is a blueprint of actions and enablers mapped to the key strategic areas of the organization, but aligned with the principles and assumptions that the organization has prioritized for themselves.
And maybe I can add here further, Shoaib, what you have explained. So Julia, it's a very interesting question for us as well. And what Shoaib has told you, actually, this is the way we are interpreting this standard, right? So there is definitely a room for maybe it was not the intent of the standard to actually give you a sort of laid out transition strategy, as you know, for example, it is left to the companies how, for example, they define it in their context and in their environment. But we of course see that as a need for, let's say, maybe a little bit more clarity on developing this circular transition strategy, and I think that will be our feedback to the development work that we hope will probably start soon. So you are right in basically raising this question. I think this will be a question for many of the people who will be trying to use the standard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the feedback. It's very interesting indeed, and also in my research and also work with students, this is what we I try to also emphasize transition in all this attempts around circular economy. So it would be interesting to learn about your take on it. And just one follow-up question: did you consider any iterations within the application of your map? I believe what we do around circular economy is connected with uncertainty, right? Maybe we come in we start the process with specific ideas, assumptions, and maybe along some way we would need to do to go around another way around this map, right?
Yeah.
So do you have anything about the iteration around this process? Any suggestions around it? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting question, Julia. So there are 2 types of iterations. One is the operational iteration, like short terms. Maybe one is really a medium term and one is a very long term. If you can see here in the picture, these iterations, so step 3, 4, and 5, they are iterative. So what we are talking about here is not an overnight transition. What we are talking about here is a slow and steady transition from a linear manufacturing system or a linear system to a circular system. And there, for example, you focus on maybe only one part, you assess the performance, you identify opportunity, you select one action, you implement it, and then you do this step repeatedly over time. And this is what we are actually doing in real life with some companies. We started working with one company back in 2013, and this is our 3rd or 4th iteration with them. So at different time, we pick a different thing. Once we focused on the value proposition. Now we are focusing very much on their reverse logistics. In another project, we focused on the product design. And this is how the company over the time is transitioning from a linear, let's say, business model towards a circular business. So this is an iteration in step 3, 4, and 5, unless the fundamental assumptions and principles change. If the fundamental assumptions and principles don't change, we don't need to go back, because they will be true for you. For example, a company is really facing, they're using a lot of critical raw materials. Maybe another company, they are creating a lot of pollution, a lot of waste. Maybe some companies are concerned with the biodiversity loss. What we see here, that last 2 assumptions here, for example, untapped economic potential and regulatory, these are the major drivers at the moment. Although the first 2 are highly important, but not for all the organizations. For For example, here, a plastic company might not think that, okay, we have a problem with the critical raw materials. And here, for example, this CO2 issues, unless we put a lot of taxes on emitting CO2s, companies will not really care about it, although it is true that it is disturbing our environment. So what we are seeing is a lot of companies are driven by these two, that there is an economic potential, we can increase our revenues, and there is regulation which is driving this transition. So unless your fundamental assumptions, because we call circular economy as a paradigm, and these are the assumptions on which this paradigm is based. If the assumptions change, of course, then you will be in a different paradigm, and then you will have a new framework, maybe a new theory for that. But as long as we are in the circular economy paradigm where these assumptions are true, I think this iteration can work, where companies can iteratively and incrementally transition towards circular economy.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Welcome. We have more than 30 organizations, and I would really like some input from companies who have bought this standard, who have tried to use this standard in their circular economy implementation. So if anyone from organizations who have tried implementing this standard, if they can provide us with some feedback.
So Shoaib, maybe there are two more questions, so if you want to take those.
How is eco-effectiveness, if considered, taken into account instead of eco-efficiency? Amir, I would divert it to you.
Well, I don't know. This is now we go into this, part that is not definitely part of the discussion in at least this standard, right? If it has been discussed in the context of 59020, maybe Rahul can highlight something, but it has not been discussed as part of 10 at least. So that's what I can say. Of course, from the research perspective, we can go into this discussion and then it will be a long discussion. But here we are keeping the scope of this standard, and maybe if 20 has addressed this in some way. Rahul, if you have any comment.
Could you repeat? I was disturbed when the question was posted.
The question is, how is eco-effectiveness, if considered, taken into account instead of eco-efficiency?
That is really related to the value question again. That is what I would go back to, because when we talk about the eco-efficiency, we usually talk about the value created by some impact. And in this case, when we talk about the whole concept of value creation, we are also going over to what I just mentioned, the complementary methods. And if you do them per function, of course, then you can come into eco-efficiency. But if you look at them at an absolute value, you can maybe talk about eco-effectiveness. And we don't really decide on that or make any decisions in the 59 or 20 about it. It's more like the choice that you make. So if you make it into a functional unit like an LCA, you come into efficiency. But if you look at the global scale on a value network, you come into effectiveness.
But I just wanted to highlight that this is not explicitly part of these standards discussions. So.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Julia again about the material traceability and regulations. Yes, so there is one dedicated principle to resource traceability, actually. And the standard has used very strong words. It says the organizations should be accountable. And we don't know what do we mean by that, but it says that the organization should be accountable for sharing the data. So organization should should collect the data, maintain the data, and then share the data. So it puts a lot of emphasis on resource traceability.
And maybe the context of this question, when we refer to upcoming regulations, I think, Julia, you are referring primarily to the concept of product passport, maybe digital product passport. And surely those the upcoming regulations are definitely demanding more, let's say, aspects to be included. And this discussion is already happening at the European Standardization Committee level. And we are in fact now discussing, because ultimately these standards needs to be adapted at the European level as well. but now they are under discussion, of course, for developing. Maybe there are 4 working groups already working on that, and this discussion is up on the table. How, for example, the upcoming regulations should be, let's say, considered in improving the content of this standard.
Yes, exactly. I just wanted to compliment that it's important to align with upcoming regulations as
Absolutely.
they're really changing, and we could see with CSRD and Omnibus and all of that, it's year-to-year basis, the changes are happening. So companies have a hard time following up on those changes. And if they're following a standard and the standard is not following regulation, it's a little bit difficult to address that. And then I was thinking also in terms of specific industries, for example, aviation industry. It's really complex and dynamic, and as you know, the supply chains are really, at least to say, they're complex. And some of the original manufacturers, they're really small, for example. So I'm not sure what is their responsibility in following this standard and what is their scope and then how are other parts of the supply chain, for example, aftermarket material services companies, what is their responsibility in following the standard and collaborating between those OMEs and MROs in terms of extending the life cycle of aircrafts.
Thank you, Yulia. Before going to Raul, I would like to make one comment only about the standards. So these are basically guidance, and these are not compliance standards.
Yeah,
These
of
are
course.
guidance standards at the moment, and in future they might become compliance standards. So they are voluntarily. An organization can use them as a guidance to move towards circular economy. But Raul, please.
Yeah, and it's more of a response because we really distinguish what we can achieve on the international level and what we can achieve on the European level. And the reason we couldn't adopt the ISO standards in Europe is because they try. Of course, we listen to everybody, but then when you listen to everybody, and 100 countries actually participating in this one, you cannot just think about Europe. So that is why we also have this TC 473 in Europe on circular economy with the same name, partly the same subjects, but really within the context of the European standardization. And yeah, I'm the chairman of that group also, and the committee there. So that's why I really wanted to highlight this, that the entire business model there is to support the European context so that we can make use of the European standards for the European regulations. And hopefully we get an alignment between the international and the European, but we cannot tell them.
Yeah, of course, yeah. The problem is, I think, with audits and auditors, you know, when these items come up with regulations and compliances, we're like, we don't know what is applicable now or what is going to be applicable at a future moment. So sometimes I think this subjective and voluntary view of standards can be also a little bit scrutinizing for the companies and not kind of put them down in terms of willingness to proceed further down the line. So I think that should be also really clear.
I can just add very much agree. I work at the certification department at RISE, and we are really trying to make them develop certification systems based on what we already know as soon as possible. But it takes time.
It takes time, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I would like to highlight here that we are following other relevant standards. For example, KTH is actively involved in the upcoming this digital product passport. We are participating in the relevant working groups, and we are following the work there, how it is proceeding. So we will see, and we will try to have this alignment between these circular economy standards and the digital product passport standards. Although the focus of digital product passport is not really the circular economy, but we need to have this kind of alignment, maybe some kind of alliance between the two committees, and we will try that. Then we have one more question from Muhammad, if you want to ask that question directly.
Yes, so I was just thinking about the LCA and LCA implementation because I believe it's one of the very effective ways to put circular economy in numbers, and this is one of the challenging problems with the concept of circular economy and advocating it. So I just wanted to see would it be easy to directly link to know exactly which LCA model or strategy can we use, just because this is standard at least?
Yeah. Thank you. Before I refer to Amir, maybe I can make one comment. Yes, LCA is challenging when it comes to circular economy, because in LCA we have this end of life product, and in circular economy we are talking about almost infinite product, reuse. So how to account for the CO2 emissions and how to interpret the results. We have published one paper on this as well. But maybe if Amir or Rahul, you would like to address this comment, because we are already over 1 minute now.
Amir.
If we have to take the context of this standard, then I would refer to Rahul. Of course, Rahul has made already a comment. But in general, if we are talking about the LCA and its connection to circularity, so then I would recommend that the paper that Shoaib is highlighting, so we have written about that. And we hope that this approach, of course, LCA, as we use it today, needs a lot of, let's say, development in the context of circularity. So that is what we have highlighted in that paper as well. Rahul, if you have anything, you commented earlier, but it would be great if you can just...
It's a very simple way, because we think of the circular economy or the circularity performance as the measuring the circularity, and that could be slower flows, or it could be lower amount of flows or anything, or even the circularity in itself. But the LCA is what we consider is the linear measurements. We related linearity with the circularity, and we did not reinvent the linearity because we recommend LCA there.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that LCA remains, of course, relevant in this context. But as Rahul has highlighted, since the LCA's primary assumption is grave to cradle to grave, actually, not cradle to cradle. Yeah. So it remains very much linear thinking, and we have proposed alternative approach in our publication as well. So if you are interested, so we can share afterwards.
Great, very nice discussion, and we are already over time now, 3 minutes. So I would really like to thank everyone who participated and who engaged with us. Please, if you have any feedback, if you have any comment, feel free to reach out to us, or if you need help with circular economy implementation, our discussion on circular economy, we'll be more than happy to engage with you.
And Shoaib, maybe before we close, if we can highlight that this survey is open.
Yes.
Until, if I understand correct, if I remember correct, 4th of April, yes. Right? Yes. So please give your feedback. I mean, if you are potential user, or if you are already, using and you have experience with use of what is published already, so it will be a great support and help for us to, let's say, do the later development work.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and take care. Have a nice weekend.